welcome to Sales and Marketing Talk Show. Today I have a special guest all the way from Barcelona, Adelina, and today we are talking about B2B SaaS growth, and Adelina will share her thoughts on that subject. But we could start off by a little introduction at start, so go ahead and please tell, who are you?
That's always a tricky question. I'm Adelina Peltea. I guess I've been in this space that you're talking about, B2B SaaS, for many years now, like 7 years in leadership in startups of such industry. I'm currently based in Barcelona. I was previously in Singapore, and before that in Berlin, Lisbon, and Brussels, and Bucharest, working with all sorts of different companies. And I'm quite happy to share insights on how we're doing things at Holded, where I'm currently at, and just exchange on the past and the future of marketing and growth.
Yeah, that sounds good, and we could actually start off by that. Could you first share your ideas on how marketing has been changing in the past? What do you think it's right now, and where do you think that marketing is going in big picture?
I was actually talking to a friend from Singapore this weekend, and he summed it up really well. He said, since the Industrial Revolution, we've been through this production phase, right? So initially it was just the product that you need. We didn't used to have, washing machines or cars or whatever, so people would just see it as the new thing. So production was enough. And then about 50 years ago, I guess, marketing started, and it was kind of like the point where now you have different products, you have different producers, and companies were trying to stand out and also kind of encourage adoption. You need a car and it will make you look like this or feel like this. So there was the beginning of brand marketing and promotions and everything that we know now as the classics, right? Like the 4 Ps. And then the digital revolution came, let's say about 20 years ago, the birth of Google. And everything became all about the clicks, all about the measurement, all about, being out there and what's the new shiny object. And now I think we are entering another phase, which I'm calling compassionate marketing. And it was kind of kickstarted by this Corona times, but I would say it was coming anyway. And compassionate marketing is now more not having brands and consumers, but more like now we're equal and it's a community and we care about each other and we understand each other. So things are changing with time. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for sharing that one. And maybe before going more deeply about marketing, we could a little bit discuss about basic metrics of SaaS companies. And I actually picked up 4 different metrics for this one that we could go through, and you could give your explanations too. And we could actually start by growth of their revenue. What do you mean by that metric, and how important do you think that one is for B2B SaaS companies?
So in a SaaS business, or not even just software, I like subscription businesses, which seem to be quite popular now when e-commerce is turning subscription and so on. Ultimately, what matters when you draw the line is net new MRR. So how much monthly recurring revenue are you adding every month? And then you can break that up into different growth levers or contributors. So for example, straightforward would be new customers. That's the thing everyone thinks about, how do I get new customers through the door? But there are many other growth levers in SaaS. So for example, expansion or lowering churns or lowering contraction, monetization as well, which is kind of usually falls between the cracks because you don't normally have a role in the company that is in charge of this. So unless someone takes ownership of it, it might be overlooked. So there are all these different contributors to what ultimately gets you to the growth of the revenue. And needless to say, number one metric that you think about in SaaS is MRR. On this note, I wanted to share, of course, everyone thinks, especially new customers and churns, like have acquisition and low churn. Somehow still churn is overlooked as well. In most companies, I think we're looking at it like, yeah, customers are churning, but like we are still making progress towards having customer success that it's generally like preventing churn and having all sorts of methods in place. Depends on the maturity of the company, at which point you start proactively looking into this. But what I notice is that many times this is baked in the business model or the product market fit. So just depending on what industry you are and what you're selling, you have a natural churn that might occur, and then it's easier or harder to have certain activities in place to reduce churn. Expansion, it's another overlooked one usually. And this is one of the interesting things we have at Holded. And again, I would say it's kind of baked in the business model and the pricing model that we have as well. In our case, we have a very high expansion MRR every month, and that helps a lot. So ARPA is increasing with every month customers are in the company, and we get quite a nice revenue stream from that.
Okay, interesting model indeed. Then the second metric I chose for us was cost of customer acquisition, and that is like very important number for SaaS businesses as well. And I think everyone understands what that basically means, so how much it costs to have one new client. But could you open up a little bit on like what kind of actions do you take at Holded in order to get that number down?
So first of all, it's important how you measure it, and you can go from simple ways to more advanced ways, again, with the maturity of the company. Straightforward is the financial look, like month in, month out. These are the expenses, and you can look only at, for example, budgets, or you can look at fully loaded, so including the salaries for the people that work on acquisition and the tools that you're using in marketing and so on. But month in, month out basically means these are the costs, and this is the amount of customers we generated, so simple arithmetics. It's good to start with because anyway, like for CAC, you look at more how it's trending in the beginning, but then you can get a bit more granular and you can look at cohorts because, for example, you have some of the spend this month will generate customers next month and next month and next month and so on. Or you can have a simpler version of that, just looking at, okay, what's your typical buying cycle length and kind of adjust the spend to that. And so if I spend, 10K today and I know my buying cycle is a month, then how many customers I get a month later and stuff like that. So there are different ways of looking at it. I think what's important is to be very clear in the company how you're measuring it and why, because there are many ways. And then, of course, lowering CAC, it's a dream for many SaaS companies because the more efficiently you can acquire customers, the better. And especially probably now during Corona times, because I would assume most companies are going through looking at their efficiency and extending their runways. In our case at Holded, we are mainly looking at the moment at time to recover CAC. So we have our CAC numbers, and then we are looking, okay, what's the ARPA that we have, and in how many months we would recover that. And we're trying to lower this number down. But then there are different ways to play with it. So one is you can lower CAC indeed by just being more efficient in your channels. But this implies that channels have a ceiling as well. And as you grow inside the channel, of course, you're attracting audiences that are less and less qualified to buy, so your conversion rates are dropping. So with time inside the channel, as you get more people, the CAC will go up. So what options do you have? Of course, you can still clean up things inside the channel, but you can open new channels that are more CAC efficient, so to balance things out and so on. But you can also use other ways. So something we started now at Holded is to actually look into doing a pricing change in a few months. So we're going now through all the research for willingness to pay and some other kind of surveys for identifying packaging options and so on. So by increasing ARPA, you can also afford a higher CAC, and that can give you like more space to grow and have a competitive advantage. So let's say your main channel is doing paid advertising. You have competitors that are bidding as well. So of course, if you can afford a higher CAC with a higher ARPA, then you're better. You also have to think that by going way too much into a higher ARPA and a higher CAC, you might change the game, because it's always this ecosystem between channels and target customers and so on. So if you're going from the lower end of SMBs to the higher end of SMBs or to enterprises, there are different pricing plans, but the game changes. Your acquisition channels change, your cost to serve the customers will change, and so on.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe from that one, we could turn into our next metric, which is lifetime value of customers. And you actually talk a little bit about that one already, like to understand who are really the best clients for you, and like who will buy more, and which customers will grow. But do you think that when we think about like lifetime value of customers, is it more about which client we are acquiring, or what we are doing from the space of marketing and sales after the client has come in to you guys?
To be honest, customer lifetime, it's a tricky one from my experience, because first of all, if you are to use the proper way of calculating it, you need to have quite a few years of historical data. So if you're in your early days as a SaaS business, it's not really usable. And then even if you have this historical data and you're a few years in the business, many times you would get like customer lifetime. It's something that you'd cover with many years. Like I've seen companies that have close to 10 years for getting the customer life cycle if you have a low churn. But as a company, you can just, even if you have investment, like you can just potentially fund all these customer acquisition costs just because you have this high customer lifetime that you'll recover in a long time. And that's why especially now, as I said, during Corona times, I would assume most companies want to get more efficient. So yes, it's true that in SaaS you have a classic ratio, right? You know, your CAC to LTV has to be 1 to 3. Ideally, if it's higher than that, you're not growing fast enough. If it's lower than that, you're not efficient. But all in all, you also have to look at your runway and like what's the time to recover all this money so you can continue funding.
Yeah. And then the last metric I chose for us was churn. And you actually at start already said that is an important number for SaaS businesses. But could you open up a little bit more about churn? What is that, and what kind of things you are doing at Holded in order to lower that number?
So churn, it's as Brian Valfor called it, and I love this definition, is the silent killer if you're not paying attention. When you are in a subscription business, we just talked about CAC, right? So you're spending some money to acquire customers, but if they are only staying with you for the first 1-2 months and then they realize it's not really for them, you're kind of in trouble. So of course, your interest is to have this customer life cycle in a good place. So the more people stay with you, the lower the churn, the better it is for you. I've seen companies of all sorts. Everyone has churn. It's normal. There are like a million reasons why customers would churn. Some depend on you, some depend on them. There is a big difference between SMBs and enterprises as well. What I would say is that you really need to pay attention. And that's why I said many times it's kind of this natural trend, depending on what product you're selling and what industry you are, that you might experience a lower churn or a higher churn. I used to work at Typeform, leading the marketing team. And one of the most known ways to use Typeform is for surveys. Now, what happens with surveys? You need it now. You have a project for your company or for your personal use. You will run your project for maybe 2-3 months, and then you don't need it anymore. So we had what we call happy churners. I love the product, great, but I've done my thing, and what happened a lot of Typeform was like we were having lots of reactivations because maybe, I don't know, in 6 months from now, you'll come back again for another project and so on. So these are the things that are baked in. And as a company, you have to navigate this. So in Typeform's case was finding use cases that the product was serving that have a more recurrent need. So quizzes and lead generation form and things like that. So churn is really important. And you've asked me how we're doing at Holded. So we're quite lucky that just by the way we are set up, the product is so sticky, and like we are basically a tool for SMBs to manage their own business. So everything from invoicing to accounting to project management and CRM, but all integrated all in one, which simplifies a lot of their processes and gives them a lot of visibility and control on their business. So what happens is once you are in and all your business details are there, it's really sticky. So it's not something you would easily switch and so on. But of course, we are still trying to provide the best experience to people, and we're constantly improving the product and communications and everything. So it's not like your customers are there and you forget about it. And then you look at reasons people are churning, and you are identifying things you could fix to improve those rates. And in our case at Holded, even if we see that our churn is quite low, still a significant amount of that it's due to not really reaching activation. So, people would start paying, but then maybe realize something is not really fit. So that's the part where we're trying to work the most on. Then our long-term retention, it's quite good.
Okay, sounds good. And then we could actually talk a little bit about like marketing and what kind of marketing do you do at Holded. And maybe before that one, many companies are like often thinking that what kind of marketing we should do. So I would love to understand why you are doing that kind of marketing and what you are doing.
What kind of marketing? It's a good question. All kinds, from performance marketing to brand marketing and all the terms you have. What we are doing well, and I would advise all SaaS startups to do, it's focus on one thing at a time. So in Holded's case, the main channel till today, it's performance marketing, so mainly Google ads and Facebook ads. And just because we focused a lot on it, and we're still like doing a lot of improvements, that gets into a very good place. And then at certain times in your company evolution, you can add new channels, but you have to be very mindful of, not spreading yourself too thin, trying to do too many channels at once. So in our case at the moment, we are scaling 2 channels. One is SEO. From a user perspective, is kind of the same. I'm searching on Google, right? Of course, the way you are capturing it in paid marketing or in SEO, you have different tactics, but ultimately you are in the same real estate. And the other one is scaling our reseller channel, because in our case, we have independent accountants that could refer multiple clients of theirs to our tool, and it's easier for them as well to manage all the clients in one space. And for resellers, initially we started with just inbound. So this kind of request just came in, and now is like the moment when we said, okay, we're ready to actually scale it and start outbound and do all these kind of things. So I think that it's really important to pay attention to the brand you want to build, and especially as now is defining the new stage of marketing as compassionate marketing. Stand out for something, get your values straight. I appreciate founders that are very particular about the number one thing they care about in the company. It can be UX, or it can be a bunch of other stuff. And of course, in the beginning, especially if you're in a startup, you don't have that much ammunition to just invest a lot in branding, which tends to be more top of the funnel. But also think that branding is within the funnel, and it's like basically every interaction you have with your customers. So I remember there was this funny image of buying a professional camera, and before you buy, you have this amazing landing pages and advertising and whatnot that look like super, super cool. And then when you receive the product in the box, you have this really lame user manual, right? So when it comes to SaaS, it's kind of like pay attention to what kind of experience you give when people are buying the product, because it's just the beginning of the journey. Actually, as I said, it's a recurrent business, so your interest is to have them with you as much as possible. And I would really advise startups to start bottom up in the funnel. So when you do brand marketing, pay attention first as your customers, like what is the experience they have at every touch point, like what kind of support you provide, how cool is your chat, of course, like all the interactions inside the product, like the little things that matter, like even like that loading icon or anything, and then take it back to top of the funnel with time. So then building your brand marketing within the consideration stage. Okay, now we are attracting customers that know what they want. They are interested in a specific solution. They might compare us with some other tools out there. So how are you standing out? And then, of course, going to the top of the funnel, to the awareness stage.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, before this episode, I did some research about you, and I found a text where you say that we are witnessing the beginning of new type of marketing, compassionate marketing. And you actually said about that one earlier on. But could you open up a little bit more, like what that really means and what kind of tactics companies can like use in order to do that kind of marketing?
Sorry, I got some glitches again. Can you please repeat?
Yeah. So again, before this episode, I did some research and I found that you wrote that we are witnessing the beginning of new type of marketing, compassionate marketing, and you actually talked about that one in the start of this episode a little bit as well. But could you open up a little bit more? What do you mean by that one, and like what companies can really do in order to start that kind of marketing?
Yeah, so I think before there used to be this distance, right? So you had you as a brand, you are something aspirational, and then you have the consumers, which is usually numbers of people from behind the company. You just usually look at numbers. But now we're seeing this increase of values and getting on a safe level. And I think Corona helped a lot with setting this because, when we all had to stay home, when we all experienced the same kind of lifestyle change, that's what brought us together. So, I might be behind the brand and you might be behind your credit card that is swiping to buy something. But it was for the first time where we really had the same lifestyle, same problems, same new opportunities, same everything. So that brought us on this level of empathy that I don't think we easily had it before. And I think it's the birth of this kind of concept, and we are still going to see quite a few campaigns coming out, and hopefully this lasts from here onwards, so it's not just a fad. But basically, it's like showing that we care about each other, that we are all people. So, your advanced B2B, right? And this used to be already for a few years being said that even in B2B, treat your customers as people, not as part of a company. So you can still apply the same, emotions in communication. You can still tie to their values. They are still people. In many cases, even if you sell B2B, it's about, they look cool or they impress their boss, or like there are a bunch of reasons. This used to be already. Now it's even more like being on this like empathy level. So really resonating on a personal level, even if it's B2B sales. And there are all sorts of different campaigns that you can do in this sense, but I guess it just starts with caring. And again, you don't have to think just like awareness campaigns or fancy things. Again, start from bottom up inside the funnel. So for example, at Holded, what we are focusing mostly this year, it's this kind of user experience we give on onboarding. And by onboarding, we don't like the first days when you're getting accustomed to the product, but a continuous onboarding, because in our product, you can do so many things that you can always discover new things. So you're kind of constantly onboarding. And the gaming industry does this really well, where you are constantly on missions and easily learning some new things, like one step at a time, not throwing yourself into the unknown. So it's really caring to provide that best experience. And going back again to the buying a professional camera, like the fancy dry user manual, kind of make that user manual great.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that like onboarding is like very important when we think about the churn. For example, I had one experience about one SaaS product where the onboarding process wasn't that good. And what we decided at Advanced B2B was not to continue with the product itself because we didn't see that much value or different use cases because the onboarding was a little bit poor on that one. Then maybe like for the last questions.
Actually, I have a very good experience. I was once looking into a payment tool for a startup back in the day.
Yeah.
I had 3 pre-selected ones, known brands. Everyone had like great marketing. They were known, they were big, they had customers. But ultimately, it boiled down to a very simple discrimination factor. 2 of them had this kind of fine print on fees, and they were like kind of hidden. And I really hated that. So I went for the one that was like from the first page, you see what it is, big front end surprises. So little things like this matter more today.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, for the last question, I actually would love to ask you that if our listeners want to like learn more about B2B SaaS marketing, what like resources would you recommend? What books to read or what blogs to read or videos to watch?
I think in marketing, like the generation of marketers we have nowadays, it's more people that kind of self-taught themselves marketing, because in the digital world, things change so fast. And it's also data-driven, right? So, but at the same time, this is good, but you might also miss the things that are not so straightforwardly measured. So what I would encourage people to explore, besides the regular skills in the space, it's one more on the user journey. And I actually have some books here. So this is one I would recommend on the user journey, Making Users Awesome. And then I would also recommend going back to the classics. We tend to forget strategies, and the new generation of marketers is more into tactics. And I would especially recommend this one on brand management. It's a classic, but it's like super, super good. And yeah, I think if you at least go through these 2 in 2020, you're already in a much better place.
Great. Thank you for those tips, and thank you very much for joining this show, and thank you for our viewers for this time. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.